name? I had no name. Not to them. My innocence was stolen at the tender age of 6 by my stepdad. For 5 years, as my mom traveled for work, he trafficked me through the night, selling my young body to his clients. My childhood bedroom was my nightmare. My chains weren't metal links, no. But I was controlled. I was confined. I was dehumanized. I longed to swing on the playground at school, but the swing hurt to sit on. I wanted to learn to ride a bike, but I couldn't bear to sit on the seat. I was a little girl, dreaming of loving and protecting her babies from beneath a man who didn't care that I was one.
Today we're talking about children and pedophile sex trafficking rings. I want to give a trigger warning. I will be sharing the stories of survivors and victims through different clips, so I want to make that clear up front. So please, I ask you to prioritize and honor your mental health. Do whatever you need to do. If you need to step away, if you need to turn the episode off, if you want to listen to another time or not at all okay. I just want you to take care of you. I also want to be really clear right from the jump. This is not an episode about secret cabals on message boards and satanic cults. I will be covering that in next week's episode because that's a lot to discuss. This is about the very real, very documented ways that children are pulled into trafficking and exploitation. The kids who are literally born into these systems and what happens to them on the inside. And then we'll also look at what it takes to survive getting out. Because while a lot of people are busy with distractions by our government, which is on purpose, there are children, there are kids whose entire lives are being consumed by networks that almost never make the headlines. So we're going to do this. We're going to jump right into reality and talk about it. Welcome back to Radical Leftist Scum. I'm your host, Valdez Salimai. First, it's really important that we just level set on what sex trafficking is. So I want you to listen to this clip from Alliance to End Human Trafficking that does a great job of explaining what sex trafficking is and who's most vulnerable.
Human trafficking is a complicated issue, local as well as global, and possibly going on right now in your own neighborhood.
Trafficking targets many different people: children, youth, and adults, the poor and unemployed, the homeless, foster youth, members of the LGBTQ+ community, those feeling lonely and unloved, seeking connection, people on the move, their lives disrupted by war, violence, climate change, racial discrimination, and natural disasters, and very often women and girls.
So what actually is human trafficking? Every trafficking situation involves a person with power exploiting another who is vulnerable. Traffickers force vulnerable people to participate in unwanted sex or labor in order to profit for themselves.
Trafficking often occurs through force, acts of physical or psychological harm to the victim, through fraud, with victims misled by lies and false promises, or through coercion, with victims threatened by harm to themselves, their children and family members, or warned of government arrest and imprisonment if they try to escape.
Just who are traffickers? People who unethically control others and profit from their exploitation. Traffickers can be close by, family members who know which of their relatives are vulnerable and alone, or family friends and acquaintances familiar to the victim. Strangers from online encounters who strike up a friendship, making offers of emotional or financial support, or employers who promise a living wage and generous benefits, but eventually trap and defraud those they have hired.
Trafficking is an assault on human dignity and freedom. It demeans the value of every human life, affecting people of all races, cultures, gender identities, and sexual orientations.
But we can help end human trafficking by educating ourselves and others. being attentive to what's happening right around us, and supporting legislation that holds traffickers accountable, addresses root causes of vulnerabilities, and supports survivor healing.
If you see something, say something. Silence never helps. You can contact the National Human Trafficking Hotline 24/7, 365. Together, we can end human trafficking. Join us.
One thing to also know is that human trafficking is modern-day slavery that is powered by psychological, emotional, mental, and physical abuse. And if you really want to understand child sex trafficking, you have to stop picturing like random suburban kidnappings and start looking at vulnerability patterns. Because exploitation follows vulnerability. And the data on this is painfully clear about who that vulnerability hits the hardest. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, many child sex trafficking cases involve youth who were already in crisis. These are runaways, kids in foster care, or youth experiencing homelessness. The NCMEC has repeatedly reported that 1 in 6 endangered runaways reported to them were likely victims of child sex trafficking. Let that sink in. 1 in 6 runaway kids. So now let's zoom out from that. The Polaris Project, which runs the U.S. National Human Trafficking Hotline, has identified clear patterns in sex trafficking reports involving minors. 1, a significant portion of victims are female. 2, a growing number are male and non-binary youth, and boys are historically underidentified. 3, youth of color are disproportionately represented in reported cases. And then point 4, LGBTQ plus youth show up at dramatically higher rates in trafficking and homelessness data. And here's a stat that should make everybody uncomfortable. Research consistently finds that LGBTQ youth make up around 20 to 40% of homeless youth populations, despite being a much smaller percentage of the overall youth population. It's thought that 1 in 10 people are LGBTQ. So we are a very small percentage of the population. So if we're 10% of the population, but the homeless youth population is 20 to 40% that are LGBTQ, that's a lot of people. And homelessness is one of the strongest risk factors for trafficking. And often LGBTQ plus kids are homeless because their parents rejected them from religion, because of religion or culture or both. So this is something we have to really be, and I'm a gay man, so this is very personal for me. But none of this is an ideology. This is structural vulnerability. That's exactly what it is. And we're going to go into that more. But first, I want to play a clip of a man, Sean Wheeler, telling us about his story of how he was trafficked as a boy, starting at 5 years old. Because it's important that we hear everyone's stories. And so I want you to hear his story. Here we go.
Sex trafficking is often portrayed as a crime that only happens to women and girls, but boys are also the victims, though their stories are not as common.
Tonight, in a Cake special report, Cake's Kate Devine meets a man who is sharing what he survived on what some call a hidden crisis.
Deb, Chris, sex trafficking can happen in a small town or a big city. Sean Wheeler, a KU grad we spoke to, said he was trafficked for years as a child. We found Sean through a nationwide group called the Exodus Road that works with law enforcement to find and stop sex trafficking.
You know, I've had people talk to me, counseling type, saying, yeah, just try to focus on a time when that wasn't part of your world. And honestly, I don't remember much of that.
For Sean Wheeler, growing up in a small town in Iowa, there are very few memories of a childhood without pain.
Older boys in the neighborhood spotted me and were very nice to me. And you know, when you're 5 and high school guys think you're cool to hang out with, you love that.
He says the torment began when he was only 5 years old.
That's where he proceeded to, his personality changed, and where that was the first time I was actually sexually molested. And he said, now, if you say anything to anyone, we'll kill your dog.
For 5 years, Sean says he was repeatedly trafficked and sold, not by strangers in a dark alley, but by people he knew. High school boys, a family friend.
The ringleader, I believe, was a business associate of my father who had even been to our house. They'd come for cocktail parties or whatever. And I remember one time where nobody was around and he groped me, and I was probably about 8, and said, I'll see you later.
Even adult women.
The assumption is that it's usually just males who are involved. And I'd say about 35% of the people who abused me as a preteen were women. One was the mom of a girl in my class.
Stories like Sean's are rarely heard. Many people still believe or just assume sex trafficking only happens to women and girls. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children reports about 1 in 6 children identified as sex trafficking victims are boys.
My greatest challenges are fighting ignorance and indifference. But I'm able to make a difference there. So, more people are starting to realize that it's not just girls.
Those numbers underscore Sean's warning. Boys are targeted too, yet rarely recognized.
There is a lot of misinformation around trafficking. I think people have a very Hollywood version of what they think trafficking is, and it's a little more subdued.
Jennifer White, founder of ICT SOS in Wichita, says in reality, sex trafficking is often hidden in plain sight, a relationship, a promise of help, or the illusion of love.
So globally, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime reports that children account for about 1/3 of detected trafficking victims worldwide. We know that girls are disproportionately represented in sex trafficking cases, but let's talk about boys too. Boys are more commonly detected in forced labor trafficking, but are likely underidentified in sexual exploitation. I'm going to play a clip from a video from the Department of Homeland Security before Kristi Noem trashed it that does a really great job of breaking down sexual exploitation versus labor trafficking. So just take a few moments to listen to this part.
What is human trafficking? Human trafficking is modern-day slavery. It is the exploitation of a person through force, fraud, or coercion. Human smuggling and human trafficking are different crimes. Human smuggling is the illegal. What is human trafficking? Human trafficking is modern-day slavery. It is the exploitation of a person through force, fraud, or coercion. Human smuggling and human trafficking are different crimes. Human smuggling is the illegal movement of someone across a border. Human trafficking is the illegal exploitation of a person. Human trafficking is about exploitation, not transportation. Human trafficking is a highly profitable crime and a violation of human rights. It occurs in every part of the world, including here in the United States. It happens in our big cities, our suburbs, and even in rural towns. It can happen to anyone. Human trafficking victims can be U.S. citizens or from other countries. Victims can be any age, race, or gender. But one thing they share is that they are vulnerable to being exploited. There are different types of human trafficking, including sex trafficking, forced labor, and domestic servitude. Sex trafficking victims are manipulated or forced against their will to engage in sex acts for money. Sex traffickers might use violence, threats, manipulation, or the promise of love and affection to lure victims. Truck stops, hotel rooms, rest areas, street corners, clubs, private residences. These are just some of the places where victims are forced to sell sex. Any person under the age of 18 involved in a commercial sex act is considered a victim of human trafficking. No exceptions. Forced labor takes on many forms, and it happens here in the US and overseas. Through force, fraud, or coercion, victims are made to work for little or no pay. Very often, these victims are forced to manufacture or grow the products that we use and consume every day. Victims of forced labor could be found in factories, on farms, doing construction work, and more. Victims of domestic servitude are hidden in plain sight, forced to work in homes across the United States. Their traffickers sometimes take their identification papers and travel documents in order to limit their freedom. They are prisoners, working as nannies, maids, or domestic help. Every year in the United States, thousands of human trafficking cases are reported, but many more go unnoticed. That's because human trafficking is a hidden crime. Victims might be afraid to come forward, or we may not recognize the signs, even if it's happening right in front of us. We need to bring this crime out of the shadows.
According to the International Labor Organization, an estimated 3.3 million children are in forced labor globally, and more than half of those children are in commercial sexual exploitation. Now here's where the anger belongs. Most trafficked children are not snatched by strangers in parking lots. They are groomed online, they're targeted while homeless, they're exploited after family rejection, they're recruited by someone they know, or they're coerced by someone offering survival. This is not a horror movie, y'all. This is a failure of housing, child welfare, mental health systems, and social safety nets. If you want to fight trafficking, fight the conditions that makes children disposable. Because when we reduce this to evil monsters in secret rooms, we ignore the demographics that are screaming right in our faces. Runaway youth, foster youth, homeless youth, LGBTQ youth, kids surviving abuse. And if we can't protect the most vulnerable children that are plain in sight, then we don't get to pretend that we care about all children. So now I want to talk about how children get pulled into a trafficking ring. So these are grooming pathways. So there's a few ways. When we hear child trafficking, a lot of people picture a stranger in a white van, a dramatic kidnapping. That does happen, but compared to everything else, that's the movie version. In the real world, the story usually starts painfully close to home. And family trafficking is very common. I want you to listen to Jessa's story. This video comes from a YouTube channel, Real Women, Real Stories, where Jessa shares her experience being trafficked by her own family. Take a listen.
My name is Jessa, and I'm a survivor of human trafficking. So when I was a little girl, my family was part of a group of people that severely sexually abused me, and that sexual abuse turned into me posing for pornographers and doing sex acts for the cameras and being raped in front of the cameras. And then that turned into me being sold to different pimps, and then me being sold to friends, and those friends doing whatever they wanted to do. It was taking place in suburban neighborhoods. I was also taken into a few other countries for the sole purpose of being trafficked and being sold. That was just my reality of cities and places. When I was 21, a lady approached me and she gave me a piece of paper. And on that piece of paper was her name and her contact information, and she said that if I ever wanted to talk to her on the phone, if I ever wanted help, she would be there. So it wasn't for quite a while later that I actually got the courage up to call her, and that turned into several months. And the message she constantly told me was that this is not who you are. People cannot define who you are, especially sex cannot define who you are. And you are so much more than this. And then she told me that I could make a choice, and she told me I could make the choice to leave. For me, it was a long struggle of me, in my mind, having to redefine what was happening to me, realizing that this was wrong, realizing this is not normal, realizing that this is not okay. Then it was the courage for me to say, this stops, and this stops now. And I remember kissing some of my siblings goodbye and just walking away. this woman, she helped me figure out how to get to the airport and how to get a plane, and I was able to get to her. And she had a safe house for young ladies who have experienced human trafficking, and I was able to enter her program at her safe house. But the sad thing was that my visa was only a 6-month-long tourist visa, and so I had to leave. And so I was taken back to Canada and got to Vancouver and got in a safe house there and was there for about 3 weeks when we received notification that they were closing. And this was in 2010, so it's just before their Winter Olympics was about to start. And the safe house was closing because the Winter Olympics was taking away the finances. So I was one of the people that was hurt through that. A woman approached me, and the first thing out of her mouth was, "Oh, I think you've been abused. I can see abuse written on your face." She told me that she wanted to be my mom, and she told me that she has a lot of houses of girls like me, and she wanted to take care of me. And I'm like, oh wow, I have somebody to help me. I have somebody here that I can look to and can trust. When I got to her apartment though, that's when things changed, and that's when things shifted, and that's when she told me that I was gonna have to work for her. Because of my past abuse and because of my past trauma, I was just so vulnerable to people taking advantage of me again. And that then instilled in me the message, what's wrong with me? What have I done? I must be just this way, and this is who I am, and so it's okay for people to use me all the time because that's the way I am. And after that second trafficking experience, it was almost impossible for me to trust anyone. But because of people who were dedicated and people who believed in me, people who saw me as way more than the things that had happened to me, way more than my story, I'm not the same person. I have completely changed, and I'm liking the person that I'm changing into. It's pretty cool, and it's exciting. So after being in the States for just a few months, they were like, the people at Safest were like, there's no way that we can let you go back to Canada. Let's start to redefine who you are. And so because I had no education up until that point, as a 21, 22-year-old, I had to go back, and the lady told me basically that if I can read, I can learn anything. So I took a black Sharpie and I wrote on my arm, if I can read, I can learn anything. I enrolled for college and was able to get a GED and went to school, was accepted. And I never thought that would happen, that a school would accept me. And that was when it birthed inside of me that someday I'm going to get my doctorate in clinical psychology to work with people who have experienced complex trauma and PTSD to give them the hope and the future that I've been given. That's my dream.
So as we see, for some kids, the person abusing and selling them is a parent or a relative, someone who has total control of their entire world. That can look like a family that's already violent and chaotic, where a parent starts selling access to their child to friends, to quote-unquote business partners, to people in their criminal network. It can look like a religious or cult-like community where the child is told this is God's will or family duty. I will be covering the religious, occult, and cult-like communities in a separate episode. Like I said, I want to focus on the data and the stories so we are knowledgeable and that we're aware. But there is an element of some cult-like communities, the occult, religious. It's part of that, but I want to ground us in facts today. But the reality is, when the person who feeds you and tucks you into bed is also the one who sells you, there is no safe adult to run to. There's no outside reference point to say, oh, this is wrong and I can leave. And speaking of safety, I want to show you this clip because it just came out in the news about Sarah Ferguson. So I don't know if you saw, there's an email. Her emails came out, and she was apparently emailing with Jeffrey Epstein, and she knowingly, as a mother of 2 teenage girls, she knowingly exposed her teenage daughters to Epstein after he got arrested, after it was known he was trafficking. So I want you to just listen to this clip about a family member bringing her kids around Jeffrey Epstein. Take a listen.
Former Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson, has been labelled desperate and a degenerate in the latest instalment of the Epstein files, with emails between her and Jeffrey Epstein revealing she was regularly chasing money and attention from the convicted pedophile. The exchanges seemingly indicate that the disgraced ex-wife of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was very attached to Jeffrey Epstein, telling him he was her pillar. She also wrote, "I am at your service, just marry me. And this, when are you going to employ me? Also, and phew, you still love me." Here's more from journalist Andrew Pearce.
5 days after that pervert was released from prison, Sarah Ferguson was taking her daughters, or offering to take her daughters, aged 19 and 17, to have lunch with a paedophile. You could not make up what self-respecting mother, let alone Sarah Ferguson, would think that was an appropriate way to behave.
Let's bring in veteran broadcaster Dee Dee Dunleavy. Dee Dee, there's no coming back from this. She clearly knew of Epstein's depraved activities, but she's still engaged with him and even took her daughters to visit him shortly after he finished serving his sentence. Before I get your input, let's have a look at a few more emails Fergie sent Epstein, a convicted pedophile at this point. She wrote, "I have never been more touched by a friend's kindness than your compliment to me in front of my girls. And this, you are a legend. I really don't have the words to describe my love, gratitude for your generosity and kindness." And this one, "Not sure yet, just waiting for Eugenie to come back from a shagging weekend." I mean, why would you speak like that to a man like Jeffrey Epstein and include your daughters, Dee Dee? I just do not understand this.
No, and it's all about the timing with these correspondence between the two of them, Rita. I think you can divide all the people involved or named in the Epstein files into two categories: those who cut off contact with him after he was convicted and sent to jail in 2008 for child sex offences. But it very much appears that Sarah Ferguson continued to be in contact with him. 2 days after he was released from prison, his assistant approached him and asked would he pay for flights for Sarah and for the girls to go to Miami. Now, we don't know that he did pay for them, but they certainly were in Miami a couple of days later. So the implication would be that he was paying for her to travel. And then we see other emails sort of after that where he's asking for his business contacts to be shown around Buckingham Palace by Sarah Ferguson, and would the girls be there and would the girls be able to show them around. It's almost like she's pimping them out, and it's actually gut-churning. It's sickening. And I think the monarchy are very worried about her at the moment because there are talks that she's speaking to a ghostwriter about writing some sort of a memoir about her time at Buckingham Palace.
Okay, so this is only my opinion, and I reserve the right to be wrong, but it just felt like she was like offering her daughters to Epstein in turn for money and power. And also don't forget that the former Prince Andrew was her ex-husband, and he's not a prince anymore because of all the evidence that came out with him and those pictures. And so I don't know, it's family. And Sarah Ferguson is a good example of that too. Now, another pathway is what advocates sometimes call the boyfriend model. So this is often an older partner or an authority figure that comes in, love bombs a teenager or child, isolates them from their friends and family, and makes them financially and emotionally dependent. And at first, it looks and feels like an escape. Like this is like the person who finally gets you. The one offering gifts, attention, maybe a way out of a bad home, which young people want when they're in a bad home. But then slowly, the asks begin to change. Do this for me, this once. If you love me, you'll help me out. That line between a relationship and exploitation gets moved 1 inch at a time until the kid is being sold to other people or the young person's being sold to other people, and leaving suddenly feels more dangerous than staying. I want you to hear Rebecca Bender's story. She was trafficked by her boyfriend, and they'd started a life together, and then, much like what I just shared, the relationship quickly changed. So take a listen.
I was born and raised in a small town in Southern Oregon, and I was a good kid in school. I grew up in a normal middle-class family. I got great grades. I was really active in sports, and I even graduated a year early. I was accepted into Oregon State University, and I had my dorm room already assigned, and I was really excited to move up to Corvallis. But that summer I got pregnant by my boyfriend, and I had to make a real tough decision whether I was going to keep my baby and unenroll from university or get an abortion and keep it all a secret. And that was a really tough summer for me. After I had the baby, I had some friends that had gone up to U of O to go to college, and they had an extra room in one of their apartments. It was at that time that I met a boy or a guy who pretended to take interest in me. I really thought he liked me, and we got along really well. He was really funny and charming, and he had a nice car, and he always picked up the tab. He had nice clothes. He told me he was a record producer, that he had a band up in Portland, and that's why he frequently went out of town. There's a saying that says when you take a child by the hand, you take the mother by the heart. And I really think that's what happened for me, because I had this new little girl and this man who showed this desperate attention towards her, like he wanted to really help make this family that I really wanted for my daughter. And he invited me to move in with him after about 6 months of dating, and I was really excited. And I brought him down to Southern Oregon to meet my family, and everything seemed fine until we arrived in Las Vegas. He said we were moving there because that was the entertainment capital of the world, and being a record producer and having a band, that's where they were going to get the most gigs and the most jobs, and that's where his job was leading him. So I desperately wanted to go with him, to be with him, and to start this family that he promised me. He pulled up to an escort service, and he said, "This is how it works in Vegas. I've spent a lot of money to get you here. I put first and last on an apartment. I filled your fridge up with food, and you're gonna need to earn that money back." And I felt trapped. I felt like, how am I gonna get out of this? And you didn't know if you were gonna live or die. You didn't know what he was gonna do or what he was capable of, and so it was really scary. I can remember just running through the casino thinking, like, these people don't even have a clue what's going on. They're just, cha-ching, cha-ching, Las Vegas, yay! And they're doing all this stuff, and I'm running for my life. I'm running from a man that has forced me into doing things that I didn't want to do. When you have a trafficker that's waiting at home with your child and says, if you don't bring home $1,500, you're gonna find your daughter out on the corner, I think I was probably more frightened to go home than I was to be in the room. Because if you got robbed, it was your fault for being stupid. If you got raped, it was your fault for not watching your back. Anything that happened to you was typically your fault, and you incurred more punishment for allowing those things to happen to you. So it made you always walk in fear of your trafficker.
Now, for kids who are homeless or in an unstable housing, the line between survival and exploitation is brutally thin. Trading sex for a place to sleep, for food, for safety from someone even more dangerous, that's not just hypothetical, and traffickers know that. That's why they target shelters, bus stations, foster care group homes. They show up exactly where kids with the fewest options are trying to survive. And then we have to talk about online grooming. Because there's the internet, there's gaming platforms, there's social media, there's DMs, there's encrypted apps like Signal. Adults who are looking for kids know exactly how to find the ones who are isolated, angry, or desperate for attention. They scroll for the posts that sound like, "No one understands me. I hate it here. I wish I could leave." Grooming can happen entirely online, and it can escalate into what's called sextortion, threatening to share images unless the child sends more, or does more, or eventually meets up in person. That can feed straight into a trafficking ring that's also producing and selling child sex abuse material, child porn. I want you to listen to the story of Natalie, who was groomed online and sold and trafficked through the internet.
There is explosive new evidence tonight in the investigation into a website accused of enabling the trafficking of underage girls. For over a year now, our own ABC News investigation has taken us through a sordid world of young girls for sale and the efforts to stop it. This week, a major breakthrough with the Senate finding evidence that the executives of Backpage.com were not only aware that minors were being sold for sex through ads on the site, but actually went to lengths to hide it. Here's ABC's Gloria Riviera.
How are you doing? For parents Tom and Nicole, this is a long-awaited day of reckoning.
It's good to see you guys.
I'm just a little nervous, you know.
Yeah. They've come to the Capitol for a major hearing.
It is time to accept that child sex trafficking has entered the digital age.
Targeting Backpage.com, the controversial website they say destroyed their daughter's childhood.
Backpage is a $600 million company built on selling sex, and importantly, on selling sex with children.
The company's suited executives for the first time forced to stand and listen to a damning indictment on the national stage.
Those children were still sold. They just tried to sanitize it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the definition of evil. Simply evil.
I first met Tom and Nicole last spring.
Yeah, they took everything from my little girl.
When I grow up, I'd like to be a doctor.
Just a few short years after that video was taken, Tom and Nicole's then 15-year-old daughter, who we'll call Natalie, would be sold for sex through the escort listings on Backpage.com.
How many encounters do you think you had during that time?
Over 150.
Over 150?
Yeah.
Would that have been possible without Backpage?
No way.
A high school freshman, Natalie got a bad grade in school and decided to run away, never suspecting that a childish rebellion would lead her on a dark path into the hands of a pimp.
What did he say to you about Backpage?
Said it's safer, said it's easier not to get caught, put me in all these clothes, took some pretty provocative pictures of me, and then go to Backpage and you can click on to post an ad.
Backpage is a basic classified ad site, but with racy adult sections like escorts and body rubs, technically legal services that law enforcement calls thinly veiled code for prostitution.
He started getting physically abusive, and he would sleep in the living room next to the front door, so I couldn't leave.
How often did you work?
Every single day. It's too simple. Asked you if you're 18 or older. I mean, a simple yes click was about as far as that went.
Whoever owns Backpage, he's got to go home at night and know that, he's selling kids today. He's just as accountable as the pimp that sold her, in my mind.
Now, we've heard about some ways of grooming, but one of the ugliest dynamics inside trafficking networks is that some victims are groomed or outright forced to help lure in other children. A teenager who's been abused and controlled is told they can earn safety, drugs, approval by convincing a younger kid to come to a party, to meet a friend, to run away together. From the outside, that can look like kids are recruiting kids, but I want to be clear, the power still sits with the adults running the ring. Survivors in that position carry an extra layer of guilt and shame, even though they were acting under coercion and threat. I want you to take a few moments to listen to Haley Robson's story, where she shares about her story, about how she was manipulated and she did what she had to do to survive. Take a listen.
Good afternoon. My name is Haley Robson. I was a 16-year-old high school student athlete who made good grades and had high aspirations for college when I was recruited and asked by a classmate of mine alongside with a 20-year-old male if I wanted to give an old rich guy a massage. But what high school girl would not want to do that? That day changed my life forever. And when I got into the massage room, Jeffrey Epstein undressed and asked me to do things to him. My eyes welled up with tears, and I have never been more scared in my life. When it was over, he paid me $200 and requested in exchange that I bring a girl each time to make another $200. I told him I did not want to do that, and then he gave me an ultimatum. Either you come here and massage me when I call you, or you bring me friends of yours to massage, and I will give you $200 per girl for each time she comes. I felt and hoped to never hear from him again, but he called me every day. He was so wealthy and powerful, and he would not let me go. I felt I had no choice. If I disobeyed him, I knew something bad would happen. So knowing I did not want to be sexually abused, I started to bring him other girls from my high school, and he paid me $200 for bringing them. I just hoped each time it would be the last time. One day, the stepmom of one of the girls brought him and called the police on Jeffrey Epstein. The police then called me in for questioning. I had told them the truth despite the fact that I was a teenager and a minor, and I was able to tell the police the names of all the other victims. The police treated me like a criminal. I had, by this time, had turned 18. I had been with Jeffrey since I was 16 and for 2 years. So they had told me So they told me I was going to be arrested. My name was then distributed to the press as a co-conspirator of my abuser, who I detested. My entire world was crashing in around me, and I started being threatened and bullied, till this day still receiving death threats. I was singled out and for many years had to suffer a smear campaign of lies about me because of the way that I was portrayed by the press. The press made me out to be a predator when I was just a 16-year-old little girl who was sexually abused by a powerful man and an evil man. For years, I had no friends. My boyfriend was murdered, and there was nowhere to turn. The government, after investigating more, learned that I was true a victim, but the damage was done and it was too late. There was no way to undo the harm the press had caused me. In 2019, I met Brad Edwards and Brittany Henderson. They changed my life and they believed in me and have helped me to finally heal. Healing is a process, and I may never get there. But the passage of this bill requiring the government to produce all the evidence that it has gathered on Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell is a huge component of healing for me and for the many other women who have suffered for so long. For many reasons. First, we and the rest of the world need answers. Why was he so protected? And why didn't anyone ever care to stop him? It doesn't take a brain surgeon to know that if he is spending thousands of dollars a day paying high school girls he abuses and had a lot of access to cash. I learned through my attorneys in the JP Morgan class action case that there were years when his staff withdrew over $1 million in cash a year. Was that not a big enough red flag? There were wire transfers to other victims, and the government did not protect us. The banks did not protect us. So lift the curtain on these files and be transparent. Every single time a new conspiracy gets circulated in the media, whether he is still alive, what powerful person had him murdered, who was on the Epstein client list, and there are names going around on TikTok and Instagram, we, the survivors, are suffering severely. We take our kids to school and everyone is talking about it. We can't read the news or do anything without hearing crazy stories that are only able to live on because the government continues to hide the evidence and the truth. So people just make up stories. Those stories hurt. They hurt real people who have already been hurt. And we have lost so many Epstein victims to suicide, and maintaining the real truth in secrecy only allows for conspiracy theorists to tell lies that drives up our anxiety and fears and will continue to lead to more pain, more suffering, and honestly, more deaths of innocent victims. It's time you do what's right by us. Unseal all the documents. We are requesting transparency, and I am requesting every congressman and woman that goes against this bill be outed. I want to know.
Okay, so make no mistake. She is 100% a victim of Epstein, and I'm glad that the law caught up with that. And then I also do want to talk about kidnapping, because although we know that your people are more likely to be trafficked by family or people they know, boyfriend, there is also kidnapping, and that does happen where children, young people are pulled from their homes or the public, and they just get sold into trafficking. I want you to listen to Simone's story about how she was kidnapped by someone she had just met. So take a few moments to hear that.
Immediately when I got in the car, I knew something was off.
Simone Miller was only 16 when she was kidnapped and trafficked by a man she had just met.
He was just like, I'm a pimp and you're my hoe and I'm gonna take you somewhere. You're gonna be given instructions on what to do and running is not an option.
She was taken to a hotel where other women were being held. Simone says the man who told her he was a rapper when she first met him warned her if she tried to escape, he would kill her mother and her grandmother.
If anybody knows me, like that's like my weakness, you know, because like my family is all I have.
As days went by, Simone was desperate to get out of this situation.
What can I do? What can I do? And I just like played along and I had him thinking like I'm okay with it. You know, I put on this red lingerie.
The pimp let his guard down, and when he took a shower and left his cell phone on the bed, Simone made a quick phone call to her mother.
And I said, Mom, and she said, baby, where are you? And I said, I don't know. I don't know where I'm at, Mom. She just said, tell me what you see, Simone. I said, I'm like looking out the window of this hotel. I said, I see like a 7-Eleven. She's like, okay, what else do you see? I said, I don't know, a Church's chicken. She's like, okay.
Somehow, with that brief description, her entire family hit different locations, searching for Simone until they found her outside of a 7-Eleven.
So all these pathways, family, boyfriend routes, survival trading, online grooming, coerced recruiting, kidnapping, they all feed children into the same kinds of rings that the headlines rarely describe accurately and on purpose. So we know that we have different ways that children are groomed. Now we need to talk about something even harder to talk about, and this is something that I'm just really struggling with and sitting with. We need to talk about the fact that there are kids who actually never had a before to compare anything to. These are the children who are born into trafficking rings. Sometimes they're called second-generation survivors or second-generation victims. So there are children who are born into these rings that most people don't even know about. A lot of them don't have documentation. No one knows that they exist. And so the sad part of that is that it makes it more possible for people who are abusing children to unalive children, which there's a lot of that. So that's why I want to talk about the second generation, the children that are born into these systems. And there's actually from the Epstein files, there was a document released. It was a journal from a young girl, and her journal she wrote this journal in real time, and she documented names and things like that. I wanted to play this clip from this account, Paranormal Files, where they took a look at that journal and the way she talked about her real-time experience. And she talked about being a human incubator. She gave birth to several children that she never saw again. And nobody knows what happened to her children. And it's speculated, and this is speculation only, but looking at the Epstein files, Jeffrey Epstein may have fathered one or more of those children. Because going back to Sarah Ferguson, she had congratulated Epstein on being a father like in 2011. So there's a child that exists out there. But for this young lady, this survivor, she felt like a human incubator, and it kind of broke her. Listen to this video.
So this is one of the most disturbing things I've ever read in my life, and it raises the question, was Jeffrey Epstein impregnating young children in order to force them to have kids that would then be brought into the world of sex trafficking and pedophile rings from a newborn, or I should say from the age of newborn, or whatever you'd say. So these are screenshots from a journal of one of Epstein's victims, and the girl talks a lot in coded language. As you can see here, this is kind of how she wrote. and she writes in these journals, but it's a pretty easy code to decipher. I deciphered a bunch of these pages. But the really disturbing thing throughout these journals is that she talks about multiple perpetrators. She names perpetrators, like the executives at AOL, Leon Black, a good friend of Epstein's. There are many more too. But this girl constantly talks about death, about murder, about her babies being taken away from her, about her being forced into these traumatic procedures that were extremely gruesome and bloody. There are also pictures of what I can assume are potentially her babies, her sonograms. And yeah, I mean, you can pause and read all of these pages. There are so many of them. I just spent the last hour reading through these journals for a video that I'm producing on my channel. And I was on the verge of tears throughout most of it. I mean, it's really, this is horrific stuff. Some of the pages she has drawn to and splattered with ink like this, or like this with some of her code. Here are some of the pages translated though. Tomorrow is the halfway ultrasound for Jeffrey. This one stuck. After they took the first baby who survived in the early miscarriage, I think it was called, I no longer feel like a person but a vessel. Will they take this one too? Who has the first one? Where did Ghislaine go? I can't let myself get attached. My body feels so tired. Will I ever be free? So then in another page of coded writing, she writes, I am such a monster. I didn't console her. I can't unhear her screams. They haunt me. I couldn't even bring myself to look at her. I am a monster. I deserve to be haunted by her screams. I am so sorry. I am so broken. Another page here, she describes the doctor who was from Israel, and she describes the procedure. This was different, a shot, and those rod-like things had a hook and so much pain. Blood and water all over the bed, and she was right, like a feeling when your tummy hurts and you have to push. I saw her fingers, this tiny head and body in the doctor's hands. It reached its tiny arm up and had a tiny foot. I closed my eyes and no more. No more cries. I don't understand. Just say these things happen. They yelled and screamed, and he said it will be the same in a couple of months. I don't understand what is going on. I can't go to school like this. I can't stop shaking. Yeah, so to me, it sounds like this girl was being impregnated over and over again, starting at the age of probably 13 or 14. And then when she was having these babies, they were being taken from her and immediately brought into the world of a pedophile ring or sex trafficking organization. There are so many things in these journals that are so twisted.
These are children whose parents or guardians are already part of an exploitation network. Maybe it's a multi-generational family involved in organized crime. Maybe it's a closed religious community. Maybe it's a so-called family business that's really a front for trafficking. Or maybe it was just Jeffrey fucking Epstein. Some of these kids may, from the outside, they may look like these are kids that are homeschooled or they keep to themselves or the family moves a lot and so you don't really know who they are. But inside, every adult with power over them is part of the system. There's no safe teacher for them to disclose to. There's no aunt or uncle to whisper to at a holiday party. Sometimes there isn't even a school. It's just whatever the adults allow. But when you're born into it, the abuse and the exploitation gets framed as normal, as destiny, as the way the world works. And for the kids born into it, this is their only understanding of life. And that's the part that I think that really fucking pisses me off, is that these children don't get to experience love, being held, feeling protected, someone caring about them. They come into this ring being abused from day one, literally day one, some of them. And that's their whole existence, because some of them also get unalived for various reasons. And it's sick. And kids are told things like, this is what we do. God chose you for this. Or they'll say things like, if you ever tell, they'll take your brothers and sisters away and it'll be your fault. It's emotional, mental abuse and blackmail. And that level of psychological captivity, that's hard to wrap your mind around if you've never lived it, if you haven't experienced it. And the really sad part is that we don't even have perfect global stats for second generation victims because most are never formally identified while they're still inside. But the picture we do have from case files, from survivor testimony, and the small number who do make it out is very grim. Many do not survive childhood or adolescence because of violence, neglect, or health complications from sustained abuse. Those who do survive often carry complex trauma, disassociation, and chronic health problems into adulthood. And escaping can mean losing every relationship you've ever had or known because the entire social world was built around the ring. Just recently, a TikToker commented on one of my videos and shared that they had been born into a trafficking ring, and it actually took her several years to finally get legal documentation of her existence and her personhood. But it took years for that to happen because she didn't exist, and then one day she did. But there is good news. Survival rates go up dramatically when there is a safe way out. A trusted adult who believes in them, specialized services that understand familial trafficking, and systems that don't punish them for their crimes of their abusers. But we also have to be aware. I remember watching this experiment. There was a segment on TV like many years ago of missing children in a supermarket. And what they did is they put up posters of the missing children at the exit and entrance of a supermarket, like at eye level. And people kept walking back and forth. But what the experiment showed was they actually had the missing kids in the poster at the gate, at the door. But nobody saw them. Nobody paid enough attention to see the sign and say, oh my God, that's the kid in the picture. Everybody missed them. It happened over and over again. People didn't notice them. A small handful remember like there were posters, but they just never looked at they never connected the kids. What that tells us isn't that people are necessarily monsters. It just tells us how easy it is for our brains to tune out like slow, ongoing emergencies in our environment, especially when we're stressed, especially when we're busy, and when we're used to seeing those kinds of images everywhere. Sometimes missing children become background noise. And if our brains can filter out a missing child poster taped to a door with the child right there, imagine how much easier it is to filter out the kid who always looks exhausted, or the teenager hanging around the bus station with an older boyfriend, or the child who never seems to be allowed to speak for themselves. But part of this episode is fighting the numbness and bringing those kids back into focus. So I want to share with you Lexi's story. Lexi shares with us what happened to her and how she navigated it. But it's these stories that help us stay focused. Here you go.
My name is Lexi. I'm from Nashville, and I am a dog mom. I love hanging out with my friends and helping people overcome the things that they've been through in life and not let it define them. Come on. The first time I was molested was as a toddler. The first time I was raped, I was 6. The first time I was sold, I was 11. After that first experience of being sold, he kind of gave me a hug and he said, "You're gonna make me so much money." And I didn't know what that meant. I just kind of went back over to my grandparents' house. And then he invited me over a different day. And they had a camera set up, and basically him and his friend essentially gang raped me for probably an hour. And filmed the whole thing. And the fact that there is video out there somewhere of me and being raped, and I don't know how that's been cut and edited to look and appear a certain way. The thing that went through my mind was, are people gonna see this? Is my family gonna see this? And the people I care about the most, it always felt like a possibility in the back of my mind. Anytime I was over at that guy's house being raped, I could literally look out the window and see my grandmother's house and how close I was to being safe, and would always hope that somebody would come looking for me. And they just never did, because I don't think anyone fathomed something like that happening literally right next door or within your own family. So right before any time a customer was brought into the room, I would be shown pornography, and being that young, I think it translated for me as an overall thing, as a woman, this is what
men expect from you, and this is what people want from you. That went on for about 2 or 3 years and just kind of ended because I hit puberty. And it was actually, the last summer of it happening was like the most violent because a lot of the men were a pedophile clientele. It was like a whole nother level to experience rejection from people that were abusing me. So it's like, I'm not even good enough for these people that like literally don't care at all.
When she said she saw her grandmother's house and wanted somebody to save her, that broke me. That broke me. So I want us all as a community, as humans, I want us to become more aware of possible child trafficking, what the signs are, what we need to be looking about for. But before we talk about those signs, I also want to be really clear. You can't diagnose trafficking from a distance. Like a single red flag doesn't mean a child is being trafficked. These signs are about knowing when something might be wrong so that professionals, people who are trained in child protection and trafficking response, can step in. But there are some patterns that show up again and again in trafficking cases, and I want to show them to you. 1, a child or teen who is suddenly accompanied everywhere by an older partner or a quote-unquote friend that speaks for them, holds on or controls their documents, or won't let them be alone. There's also youth with multiple unexplained phones. Maybe they have hotel keys, large amounts of cash while still having unstable housing or basic needs met. There's also someone who seems extremely fearful or anxious about law enforcement of any kind or any kind of authority, even when they're the ones who need help. Then we have kids who talk about owing money or debts that they can never seem to pay off. And then there's also visible signs. So visible signs of neglect or abuse that's combined with like total social isolation. So like no friends allowed over, no activities, or any connections outside of a tight circle of certain adults. And then there's also frequent running away or being found in hotels on the street or being found with much older partners, especially when combined with any of the other things I just said. There's also red flags online too. So online red flag patterns can look like adults consistently contacting minors through DMs, gaming platforms, or encrypted apps and trying to move conversations off public platforms. And then there's also the pressure to send sexual images followed by threats to share them if the kid or child doesn't comply. So again, check kids' apps or get them off the apps. Again, none of these on their own are proof. But when you see clusters of these signs, especially in kids who are already like in vulnerable situations like homelessness, foster care, family rejection, it's a signal that something may be seriously wrong. And the goal isn't for each one of us to play detective or vigilante. The goal is to notice when a situation doesn't sit right and how to contact people who are actually trained to respond. That might be a national trafficking hotline, child protection services, a school counselor, or a trusted local organization that works with at-risk youth, depending where you live. I'm going to give you this incredible story of Sheila Frederick. She's a flight attendant who is trained in identifying signs of trafficking and how she managed to save a young girl being trafficked on a flight. Take a listen.
Had you been trained specifically to look out for these sort of suspicious situations?
Yes. Good morning. Yes, our company trains us on what to notice, what to look for, and I'm also in a group, Airline Ambassadors International, and they also train us to what to look for in certain situations like that.
It was incredibly quick thinking of you, though, wasn't it? To sort of, was it just the fact that she was looking disturbed and dressed very differently to her fellow traveller that made you think something's not right here? This isn't a couple of friends travelling together.
Yeah, it was very out of the ordinary. I noticed her, she just wouldn't give me eye contact. He was well dressed and she was she wasn't. So I'm like, that's odd. So I just wanted to get to the bottom of what was going on, because in the back of my mind, I was trying to let it go, and something just said, don't let it go, don't let it go.
So where did you get the idea? Because, of course, the gentleman wouldn't let you talk to her. He was getting very defensive. Where did you get the idea to leave her a note and then put it into the toilets so she could then write on the note for you, so she wouldn't actually have to verbally communicate?
Well, as me and my coworker, we were on the beverage and snack cart, and I had to ask them, would they like a beverage? And I was trying to get her to make eye contact with me, and my coworker distracted the gentleman, and I was trying to get eye contact from her, and she finally looked up, and the look in her eye was just heartbreaking, heartbreaking. So I excused myself to go to the back, and I just broke down. I cried because the look in her eye just made me extremely sad. And I said, I have to get her to talk to me, to get her to respond to me in some kind of way. So I was in the back, and I was trying to think. I said, God, just give me a sign, just give me a sign. So I just happened to stick my hands in my pocket, and I felt the pencil and paper in my pocket. And I said, if I could write her a note, if I could get her a note, then maybe I can see what's going on. And then I thought, I don't think he's going to let me give her a note. So I thought, how can I get this note to her? And I was leaning up against the lavatory of the aircraft, and I said, oh my God, I could put it in the lavatory. And I was thinking again, how can I get someone not to come into this bathroom, because the aircraft were full and it was 2 lavatories on board. So I said, I have to lock this bathroom so nobody else can get in here. So I went back up to the front to finish the service with my coworker, and she turned around and she looked at me. So while my coworker was talking with the gentleman, I got her attention, and I mumbled bathroom, and I kind of did a pencil sign with my finger, and she kind of nodded her head a little bit. And I said, oh my goodness, I hope she understands what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to do. So as we were finishing the beverage service, I saw them get up, and the gentleman let her out, and they were coming toward the back, and I said, oh my goodness, they're about to come and use the bathroom. So I stood there, and she approached me, and I said, hi, would you like to use the lavatories? And then she kind of nodded her head. I said, excuse me? And then he said, yes, she needs to use the bathroom. And I said, okay, okay. And I said, oh, you know what? You can go ahead and use this bathroom. This is for the crew, but it'll be okay if you use this bathroom. So I unlocked the bathroom, and I let her in that bathroom. And he was standing there waiting for her. And I was waiting with him because I was not gonna move. I was not gonna move. And she came out of the restroom, and they was walking back toward their seats. And I was watching them, so when they sat down, I ran in the bathroom, and I said, oh, please, God, please let her write something on this note. So I turned the note over, and it says, I need help. And right then, I just broke down. I said, oh my God, I gotta help her. I gotta help her.
And what you managed to do, Shalia, you went up to the pilot, and you mentioned it to the pilot, and you had sort of security ready to land. How long did you have between getting that note and then landing and security coming on the plane? Because that must have felt like a lifetime.
It felt forever. We were on our initial descent into San Francisco, so I had a small window, and I knew I had to work fast. And I picked up the intercom to call the captain, and I said, Captain, we need the authorities to meet the plane because this young lady needs help. I don't know what kind of help, but she says she needs help. And I explained to the captain what was going on, and he says, okay. He said, we can make that happen. And we landed, and the flight attendant that was in the front, she announced, ladies and gentlemen, can you please keep your seats? Wow. The authorities have to come on and take care of a little matter, and we'll be with you in just a moment. And we was trying to keep it upbeat so we wouldn't alarm anyone or we wouldn't scare anyone. And they came on, and they went right to their seats.
That made my heart happy. I'm so glad that she was able to just step in and save that young girl. Now, you know, The good news, I guess, if we can call it good news, is that we actually know a lot about what does help in these situations. So let's talk about that. Survivors need long-term trauma-informed support. So that means they need therapy that understands complex trauma. They need safe housing that doesn't yank them back into chaos every few months. They need financial support so they're not choosing between safety and rent. And they need legal support that clears records for crimes that they were forced to commit. And what they also need, and I cannot emphasize this enough, we have to believe the survivors. We have to believe the victims. We have to believe them. Sometimes there's, especially on the right, which I shared in the last episode, there's just like this diehard need for like courtroom ready evidence of what happened to Sasha Riley or Katie Johnson or anybody that is named Virginia Giuffre. The allegations, the evidence. The FBI calls are the evidence. Like, also, fuck you. You're not a judge. Believe the survivors. Listen to them. Peer support matters. Survivor-led organizations matter. There is something powerful about being in a room or even an online space where you don't have to over-explain why your brain works the way that it does, why certain dates or smells or sounds send you spiraling. On the system side, this is where we really can come in too. We need laws and policies that actually see trafficked children as victims and survivors, not as willing participants in their own exploitation. That means we have to decriminalize survival behaviors. Whatever a child has to do to survive, that's what they have to do to survive. That also means giving foster youth and runaways somewhere to go that isn't just another institution. We also need to fund child protection teams and specialized trafficking units that are trained to listen when a kid says something is wrong at home. That also means we need to invest in housing, mental health care, and LGBTQ plus youth shelters as anti-trafficking work. And for the rest of us, you listening to this episode, all of us, it means getting really honest about the gap between what we say we care about and what we actually fund, support, and vote for. If you care about kids in trafficking rings, you have to care about public housing, about mental health services, about queer and trans youth shelters, about immigration policy, because all those things shape who is vulnerable and who has somewhere safe to land. It also means being critical about where you get your information, whose stories you amplify, whether it's sharing that viral thread because it's true or because it scratches an itch. Real kids are living and dying in these systems. They deserve way fucking more than hashtags. Brixley Diana said it best, we're not angry enough. Take a listen to her rage. That should be all of us.
Jeffrey Epstein's youngest victim was still attached to their umbilical cord. You're not angry enough. A young child who was in labor compared contractions to a tummy ache. You're not angry enough. They described babies, newborn babies, as tasting like cream cheese. You're not angry enough. Life Touch, the organization that takes everybody's school pictures in America, solicit those photos and that information. You're not angry enough. Your president was sticking his finger in children's private areas to see how tight they were before auctioning them off. You are not angry enough. They were taking young girls, children, binding them, cuffing them, gagging them, blindfolding them, and taking them outside, putting magnifying glasses up to their skin on a very sunny day, and burning their initials into them. You are not angry enough. They were kidnapping kids to breed those kids, to then use those kids for whatever they wanted. You are not angry enough.
I'm going to link survivor-led organizations, national and local hotlines, and anti-trafficking resources on my Patreon. The link will be in the episode description. And if you have the capacity, consider supporting these entities directly, whether it's financially or amplifying their work. Because I know it can feel helpless. Like, where do we start? How do we save these kids? How do we get them out of these trafficking rings? Support the people who are doing the work. That's the best way I can put that for you. And I also want to say, if you're listening to this as someone who has lived through anything like what I've described, I want to say this clearly. What happened to you is not your fault. The shame belongs to the people and the systems that hurt you and benefited from your silence, not to you. The world is on your side and we are fighting for you. I'm just sorry that it took us this long to show up. Friends, all of you, take care of yourself after this episode. Do something grounded. Call someone, call a friend, listen to some music. And also check out my Patreon for a full breakdown of this podcast. I have a blog post. I'll have resources. I'll have additional resources that I didn't mention here. But feel free to check out my Patreon. All of that's linked in the episode description. I appreciate you taking the time to hear this episode out, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.